The Welcome to the Show podcast is independently produced by me, Manny Gomez, and CT. Help people find our show by taking 2 minutes to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you. What's up, everybody? It's the Welcome to the Show podcast. Today, I'm riding solo, and we are re-releasing a couple of old episodes that you may have already heard, but if you haven't, here they are again. So the first episode is an interview we did with Billy Corben, who's the director of Screwball, which is a documentary about the biogenesis scandal that occurred in Major League Baseball during the earlier parts of the 2010s in that area. I'm re-releasing this episode because Screwball, the documentary, is re-released on Netflix and it's available to a wider audience. So we're noticing that there's been an uptick in some of these interviews on our website. So we figured we'd make it a little bit easier for people to find by re-releasing the interviews in its entirety right here. So in this episode, you're going to listen to our talk with Billy Corben. We're going to go through a list of some of the movies that he's directed, how he went about doing Screwball, where he got the idea from, which you'll find kind of surprising, and we'll get into the whole shebang with Screwball. So without further ado, here's Billy Corben on the Welcome to the Show podcast.
From the moment I remember, I wanted to be a baseball player. It was the American dream. I got kicked off the team for smoking weed. It was a disaster. My plan was go into medicine.
The Belize School of Medical and Performing Arts.
What is Florida about? It's about vanity and sex. It was a perfect place for the anti-aging movement.
Especially down here in Miami, everyone wants things now.
There's almost no regulations.
You'd have people who pretended to be doctors, giving all types of medical advice.
He had a white lab coat that said Dr. Tony Bosch. He had a stethoscope around his neck. Yeah, I assumed he was a doctor.
Manny was the first VIP client. Within weeks, his focus was much better. He felt a lot quicker. This guy says, yeah, my cousin is in the Yankees. It was an A-Rod. He says, I want whatever Manny was taking. I had a true believer right away. 7 days after he started my program, he went ahead and in one game, he hit 3 home runs. And he said, I'll give you an extra $150,000 a year if you give me an exclusivity. I said, for 200, you got a deal. Listen, each home run costs money. At this time, Biogenesis had close to 300 athletes. We were consuming so much product, I had to go to the black market.
Okay, I just stumbled across some kind of steroid ring.
I didn't think I was gonna get caught. I was busy going to parties. My cocaine bill was $6,000 a month.
The biggest steroid scandal in sports history exploded over $4,000.
Yes, look, if I don't get my money, I'll blow this whole thing up.
It was just an absolute clown show.
Get rid of steroids now. This is my whole life, my legacy. You tell me why I should serve one inning.
Tony Bosch is not a doctor. Tony Bosch is a drug dealer.
Coke addict, bad son, bad father, bad brother, bad everything.
What can you tell us about that?
No comment. He's lucky he's not in the canal anywhere.
This guy's connected. A lot of people involved. Don't do this, you're gonna get killed. So I got my 9mm.
For every sleazy thing Major League Baseball did in trying to pay witnesses, threatening people to cooperate, A-Rod and his crew were doing almost the exact same thing.
You pretty much can forget the Hall of Fame.
It was almost like, hey, Mom, I made it to the big leagues, but in a different way, You can't make this up.
So let me start off with this real quick. I just need to know, how in God's name did you get away with telling this story? Because I've come across a few baseball stories in my time through some sources, and there's times where I'm afraid to publish it because they are a powerful entity. They're a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it seems like they can get away with murder. So how did you get away with it? How did you get away with making Screwball?
And Major League Baseball is, in fact, a legal monopoly in this country as well. Yeah, so a very powerful multi-billion-dollar organization that has also defrauded countless municipalities in a quest to publicly finance their ballparks, to make rich people even richer. I mean, the whole sports welfare scam was really refined and perfected by Major League Baseball. And in fact, one of the biggest mistakes they ever made was actually expanding franchises into Florida, because Florida always used to be their stalking horse. Remember, it always used to be if you don't give us what we want, we're going to move to Florida. We're going to move the team to Florida, and then once they they started 2 teams in Florida. Nobody gives a shit about nobody gives a shit about those teams rank at the bottom of attendance. They're just like it's the worst of everything. And now they don't have their stalking horse anymore. Now they got to be like, well, we'll move to Vegas. Now that, they have to say. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty powerful, moneyed and litigious organization, and as evidenced by the amount of money they spent on this A-Rod investigation and this biogenesis hustle, the amount of millions of dollars that they spent on Tony Bosch, who was the fake doctor that that treated A-Rod and Manny Ramirez and Ryan Braun, et cetera. Yeah, but I got to tell you, I don't make my living in baseball, so there's an odd kind of dynamic between sports writers and sports. I don't want to say journalists per se, but people who cover sports, there's a weird dynamic between them and the teams and leagues that they cover. And I don't begrudge you that. It comes along with the game. You almost serve at the pleasure of the people that you're supposed to be objectively covering, and so that puts you in a tenuous position sometimes. Like you said, when you get a good story, if you're the byline on it, you might be in some deep shit. You might not get the access that you need to do your job. So it's always a really tight spot. They expect you to diss their players and diss their coaches and in terms of management and game decisions and performance, but you can't hit the pocketbook, and you can't, there's certain things that I get are off limits. But I don't give a shit. I don't serve at the pleasure of anybody but our audience, and we look for great stories and we try to tell them well, and stories that we think are going to resonate with an audience and entertain an audience and tell them about something they might not know about or give them some additional insight on. And so that's our only priority. We don't really look at like, oh, well, what are the repercussions of this? Am I never going to go to another Marlins game again? Who gives a shit? Nobody goes to a Marlins game, So, I mean, I will say this though, we have the truth on our side. We have facts on our side. We've been making documentaries for almost 20 years, and this is the most meticulously researched documentary we have ever made, exactly for that reason, to make sure that we were reporting facts. And we obtained documents that had never been released publicly, transcripts of sworn testimony, so we were able to fact check against sworn testimony. We researched basically every line of the movie to make sure that it was factually accurate, and so that was the one thing we did to make sure that we were covered.
And we're talking about Screwball here. The way I describe it, this is my quick synopsis of it without trying to give too much away. It's a true crime drama comedy. It involves baseball's probably biggest scandal ever, the biogenesis scandal, which involves a fake doctor. When I watch the movies, I mean, I've heard Porter Fisher's name left and right, and to sum him up, I mean, he seems like a decent guy. He's actually going to come on the show, so I don't want to talk too much shit about him. But he's a tan obsessed, basically client/investor of Tony Bosch, and the story also involves Alex Rodriguez.
I would say the Black Sox scandal is probably a bigger.
that one was that one took the cake.
But
that involves gambling.
Yeah, but this one definitely involves the highest paid player in the history of the game, so there's something to be said for that.
And it involves Major League Baseball itself. You know what I mean?
I want to get this out of the way. I'm probably like the biggest A-Rod fan between the three of us, and Manny warned me about watching this movie beforehand, saying that it paints A-Rod in kind of like a bad picture and everything. But I'm still a huge A-Rod fan. Like, the movie didn't sway me in the other direction. But what I did love about the movie is that it's like A-Rod was the one that came out looking bad in the whole thing because he's A-Rod, but in reality, like, nobody was innocent in this entire thing. Like, every character, including especially Major League Baseball, was not innocent in this entire thing. So,
I agree. Nobody's got clean hands, and the movie's not intended to make anyone in particular look bad or to make you not like anyone you like.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely accurate, meaning that like we weren't trying to make A-Rod look bad. We were just trying to show you exactly what he did, how he behaved. We didn't even, I got to tell you the truth, the movie barely scratches the surface because it's really not about A-Rod. I mean, in terms of A-Rod's misbehavior, if you will, or his conduct in this whole situation. I mean, he allegedly lied to the DEA during a Queen for a Day meeting, which is a federal crime. I mean, some of Trump's people got in trouble for that. Papadopoulos, I think, got indicted for that. So the whole point of a Queen for a Day meeting is you can tell them anything and they agree not to prosecute you or hold it against you. And he allegedly lied in that meeting, which is not only not unwise, but it's like I said, it's a federal crime.
Wow.
So there's all sorts of he bought when he bought that hard drive. You see it in the movie when they were you had Major League Baseball investigators with a bag full of cash from I can only presume some MLB slush fund or something that they were turning over to a convicted felon in a diner for stolen medical records, which we have a former investigator for the Florida Department of Health who alleges that was in fact a crime committed by Major League Baseball's investigators, also for which no one was held accountable. But while they were doing that, the felon had the great idea that not only was he going to sell these records, stolen records, for $125,000 cash to Rob Manfred and Major League Baseball investigators, but he was going to have a buddy at another table film the transaction, this shady transaction, with his iPhone so they could turn around and sell that video to A-Rod so he could prove that MLB was acting all shady. But here's the funny thing. He panicked or something, and he deleted the video off the hard drive and sold A-Rod a blank hard drive for 6 figures.
Wow.
And A-Rod allegedly sent the hard drive all around the world to data recovery services to try to recover the deleted video from the hard drive. Never did. And so the felon never got his second 6-figure payment that he was due if they were able to recover it. He only got the first one. You've got private eyes running amok from both MLB and A-Rod. You've got Major League Baseball abusing the courts and filing a frivolous lawsuit just to compel people that they wanted to testify in their investigation and arbitration against A-Rod. They sued them for no reason, just basically to force them to have to come to the table or maybe be deposed under oath. It was a lot of abuses occurring on all sides. And like you said, nobody's hands are clean in this.
No.
Yeah.
So did A-Rod or Major League Baseball come after you in any way, shape, or form? Like, did they threaten you or anything like that?
Well, I mean, I don't expect an invitation to J-Lo and A-Rod's wedding, but nobody is, as you put it, come after us. I think the head in the sand approach is a pretty wise one. It's served Alex pretty well for the past few years. If you just ignore it, stuff just seems to go away. And this is a guy who's never apologized or never really acknowledged the full extent of his wrongdoing or his lies to the public or to his fans or friends or teammates or anyone for that matter. So and he's doing pretty good, I think. So I think their goal is to just sort of ignore it and maybe it'll just go away. But the funny thing about it is that the reason why we made this documentary is because it was first pitched to us in November of 2013 by Alex Rodriguez in person.
So
wow.
That's how this all started. That's how we started to make this documentary.
That's insane, man.
Yeah.
I want to just say this before I forget later on in the interview, but the funniest part to me in the entire movie, I'm not giving away any key details, but the funniest part was when the A-Rod's guy went to ask him for money. He's like, hey, I need $4,000 or was it $10,000? I think. He says, I need $10,000, and it's the two kids talking to each other, but then he peeks over at the Minotaur painting and he just looks at him like kind of like, oh, you're a weird dude. That was the funniest part of the movie. I was like literally laughing when I saw that.
The famous or perhaps apocryphal centaur painting.
Oh, the centaur,
Alex's head on it. Yeah, which I've heard from people who've actually been in that apartment who claim to have seen it, and I'm not even entirely sure. But I know in that New York Magazine interview that he did recently, like in the last week or two, he mentioned, like, he was asked point blank about it, and he basically gave this sort of denial where he said, "I do not currently own a centaur painting of myself," and but doesn't really answer the question, have you ever owned a centaur painting of yourself? So it leads me to believe that perhaps at one time or another he did. And I'm kind of pissed, because if he did and he got rid of it but didn't auction it off to charity, that's pretty aggravating, because he could probably make a lot of money auctioning that off for charity.
He probably never wants that thing to see the light of day. Come on.
I'm a huge A-Rod fan. I'm the biggest A-Rod fan, but I can't defend the guy. He's weird sometimes. He just sounds weird too.
Listen,
like
you're winning that fantasy league, man, because I mean, like, whoever thought we would ever live to see the day where everybody loved A-Rod and hated Jeter? Like, when the hell did that happen?
Wow, yeah, you're right. Didn't even think of it like that.
Yeah, it's like Alice in Wonderland. We're through the looking glass.
Seriously, that's exactly what it is.
And so real quick on Porter Fisher, because to me, he's the most interesting character in this whole thing, just because it's like a head scratcher. Like, I'm trying to figure this guy out. So, and not just Porter Fisher, Tony Bosch too. Like, this was all over $4,000, and Tony Bosch specifically has access to multi-million-dollar individuals out there. He couldn't have asked somebody for the money to shut this guy up. You know what I mean? Like, what was that about? It's almost like Porter Fisher doesn't understand the meaning of leverage. You know what I mean? Like, he just took the documents and just started making copies of it and handing it to people. It's like, that's not how it works. Like, did he ever explain that to you? Like, did any of this stuff ever come to his mind? You know what I mean?
What's the line from Dark Knight, when an immovable object meets an unstoppable force? That's like Tony and Porter, you know. Like, it's a really bizarre dynamic, obviously, you know, and the fact that, as you said, I try to sum it up for people who, when I say, like, the movie's not really about A-Rod, because A-Rod's kind of like collateral damage. But don't tell A-Rod that it's not about him. Don't tell A-Rod nothing's not all about him. But he's somewhere kissing himself in the mirror right now. But the fact is that this story is about how essentially the career of the highest paid player in the history of the game effectively ended over a $4,000 debt between a cocaine-addicted fake doctor and his fake tan-addicted steroid patient. Like, that's what's so batshit about this whole story.
Insane.
Yeah, and so when you ask that question, like, well, why the hell didn't he just pay him the money? Or why? And the truth is that Tony's quite candid about this. Tony's kind of in, like, he's in a downward spiral at this point in his life. You know, all of this is coming to a head. You know, his players are starting to piss dirty. You know, Melky Cabrera is one of them. Bartolo Colon, I think that was like back to back. And he is like putting all of his money directly up his nose. He is not paying his child support, his rent, his cable bill, nothing. And he's swiftly approaching rock bottom. And that's what's happening during the same time period. This, you know, Porter Fisher comes and offers him some money to invest or to get involved in the project, and they call it a loan, and he's going to pay interest. And it's just really, I don't want to say it's a complicated arrangement. It's just a baffling arrangement. Now, we've investigated this pretty thoroughly, and we're still not sure we fully understand what the nature of this agreement was. I do know that Tony didn't pay it in a timely fashion. And here's the other messed up thing about it. When I say a timely fashion, it wasn't just $4,000. It was like 4 weeks also. Yeah. It wasn't like Porter has a short fuse, let's say, you know, so he got pissed. And when he started to realize how shady, he thought Tony was a doctor. Let me put it to you that way. Tony was not a doctor. When he started to realize the shadiness of this whole operation that he believed in so much and really wanted to get behind and be a part of, and, you know, and promote and maybe even invest in, he was pretty pissed, and he was, you know, pretty heartbroken. And it was like finding out Santa Claus doesn't exist. I think. And so he the shit hit the fan really quick.
Porter Fisher reminds me in the movie, especially the way he was talking, he reminds me of like the Incredible Hulk. But instead of a sheen of green, he turns into a sheen of orange or brown from all the tanning, and because he just seems like he just lets things go and go and go, and eventually he just explodes, and he's just like, I'm sick of this shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a little quirky. I mean, it's a lot of these characters exist in that kind of Elmore Leonard, Carl Hyacin, Coen Brothers-esque kind of like only in Miami kind of characters. You know?
Yeah, that's exactly what it reminded me of. It reminded me of a Coen Brothers movie. And in actuality, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, this is a very unusual documentary in that, to me, it felt like a feature film, not a fictional, but with actors and stuff. Well, you did have actors. Was this like an expensive project to make? Why did you film it this way? Why didn't you film it like a traditional documentary?
Well, we've done sports docs in the past. We did the ESPN 30 for 30s, the U and the U Part 2. And when you do a sports doc, it's kind of a straightforward proposition. I don't want to belittle the angst of documentary filmmakers. Documentaries are difficult to make, but it's a pretty straightforward process. I mean, you interview the sports guys and they tell you about sports, and then you go get the sports game footage and you put that footage over the people talking about the sports. You know what I mean? Like it's not paint by numbers, but it's pretty straightforward. So here you might have noticed that they only mention maybe 3 baseball games in the entire movie. They mention that Kansas City game that A-Rod plays in. It's the first game after Tony starts treating him, and he hits 3 home runs. So there's a little brief clip from that. There's some clips at the end when the scandal erupts in 2013 and the pitchers start gunning for him. So there's a couple clips, but that's it. Otherwise, what do you do with the rest of the hour and 40 minutes of the documentary? And so we knew we were going to have to do some reenactments. And so all this shady shit goes down in nightclubs, in fake doctors' clinics, in sports bars, in locker rooms, in hotels. So we were going to have to film those scenes and bring them to life again with actors. And I also noticed that both Tony Bosch and Porter Fisher had very similar storytelling styles where they talk in dialogue. It's a real I walked into his office and I said, "Where's my money?" And he said, "Well, I don't have your money." And I said, "You better get my money." And he says, "I'm Tony Bosch. What are you going to do about it?" And I said, "I'm going to wring your neck." And I was like, oh, shit, we could drunk history this. We could have the actors on set lip syncing the dialogue right from the mouth of our interview subjects. And all of the actors are going to be 8, 9, and 10 years old. And that's what I decided we were going to do for this. Because first of all, the movie was always called Screwball, meaning we always wanted to be this bizarre, irreverent, farce, this screwball comedy. And so that was the tone of the whole thing all along. But then when we realized, we have to do recreations, reenactments, we were like, well, we have to do it in a way that kind of supports the light tone, the comedic tone of the movie. Yeah. So you didn't want to do something dark or mysterious or noirish. And so we went and came up with a style that we thought would be fun, would be lighthearted, and would support the overall tone of the movie. And not to mention that every single one of the adults in this story acted like a child. So it seemed to all work out. And in the end, we kind of bring the point home, I think, without spoiling anything, that really the victims here are the kids, both the high school kids that Tony Bosch injected and rightfully went to prison for doing so, but also the kids who look up to these players and these athletes like they're role models. And really, they're a lot of the best of them are liars, cheaters, and stealers. So so I think that ultimately the kids who look up to these guys as role models are the victims.
And it worked. I mean, it worked perfectly. The having the kids narrate was great because it really highlighted how absurd this whole story is in reality. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
And one of my favorite parts was when A-Rod and Tony Bosch were in that nightclub in Miami, and they lost a vial of blood. And I'm just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you make $200 million, you're worth like $400 million, and you're in a nightclub getting injected by this fake doctor, and then you lose the vial of blood, and you're on the floor looking for it. It's insane.
Yeah, that was insane. It. Live nightclub, one of the most famous clubs in the world, at the Fontainebleau Hotel on Miami Beach, and we shot the scene with 30, 40 kids.
Yeah, that's great.
We shot it in the actual Live nightclub while it was closed, of course. On an off day. Yeah.
Is there something? Oh no, go ahead, TT. My bad.
I was just gonna say that I'm watching the movie, right, and I'm always like, I didn't know how to feel, because I remember when the whole thing was taking place, and that game where A-Rod came back, and he was at Fenway, and Ryan Dempster tried to plunk him, and then he didn't, and then Girardi. I'll never forget that game, because A-Rod came back later that game and hit a home run, and I was like, finally, like, there's something good in this whole hurricane that's going on. And then I remember seeing the Tony Bosch 60 interview, and just like, I was just so pissed off, only to find out that this guy's like a cokehead, that he was just trying to cut a deal, and like it could have gone. He basically played a bigger role than I don't even know how I'm trying to word it, but the movie kind of like just made me feel better about the whole thing, because it was a mess. It was just a complete mess,
Well, yeah, but I mean, you have to accept kind of A-Rod's contribution to the madness. I mean, he was not exactly a passive player in all of this, and Tony, had to make a decision at some point about whose side he was going to be on. I think he says in the documentary that Alex may be an eccentric multimillionaire, but MLB were eccentric billionaires. So he ultimately sided with them. I think at some point Alex paid him like $50,000 or something like that to help out with his legal bills. But in the end, MLB he pulls out his his budget, and he goes through all the line items and how much MLB spent on his living expenses, his personal protection, bodyguards, his attorneys, his travel, and it comes out to just over $4 million.
Insane.
Wow.
So he went with the I guess he went with the right team.
Yeah.
The deeper pockets, God knows.
Did you ever get to talk to Eddie Dominguez, who just wrote the book Baseball Cop? Did you ever get a chance to speak with him?
My producing partner, Alfred Spellman, has on several occasions. He was in the process of finishing his book and didn't want to talk on camera, which I think is a shame.
It is.
We've also been in touch with at least one other, I will say, of the investigators involved in the case. And I've spoken to over half a dozen, actually more than that, nearly a dozen people who were involved in the situation, some of whom are mentioned in the movie, but we did not get to interview on camera as part of our process of verifying certain facts. And I will tell you that every time someone has Eddie, I think, was skeptical for a while, but he finally did watch the movie and tweeted something very nice about it just a few days ago about the accuracy of the movie. That's what I keep finding, is that people hear about the movie, people who are involved, in the actual events. They hear about the movie, they kind of shit talk it, they're concerned about it, then they see it and they're like, oh yeah, that's how it went down. It might not be 100% of the story, but we only have so much time in an hour and 40 minutes, but everybody who was involved in the story that I'm aware of, no matter whose side they were on or what they were doing, really everybody was on their own side, to tell you the truth. But everybody who sees it says, yeah, the facts that you report are 100% accurate. Obviously there's more to the story, but everything in there is the way it went down.
Yeah, we had Eddie Dominguez on last year when his book came out, and a lot of the things that came out in this movie is corroborated in his book. And he was the only member of the DOI that didn't sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So he's out there talking about this stuff, but nobody's buying his book. It's insane. And I'm hoping that this movie, because it's a good. My wife could give two shits about baseball. She watched it, she liked it. It's a funny movie. It feels like that's the perfect description of Coen Brothers movie. And yeah, I urge everybody to watch it. Screwball. It's available on video on demand. I wanted to ask you another question. Is there something that's not in the movie that you wish you could have, that you wish you had more time or more money or something to put into?
Yeah, there was a couple things that because of exactly those reasons, budget and schedule, we weren't able to do. Okay. There was a car chase that went down. Porter Fisher was being chased around the South Miami Pinecrest area, like his neighborhood, and right around where the Boca Tanning Salon was, across from the University of Miami. He was in a car chase, and he had called up Pete Carbone, who owned the 24-hour tanning salon, who started to chase the car that was chasing Porter. So you had this like three-way car chase going on, and he apparently, Pete Carbone is like like just a giant gorilla of a man. This like just Italian kid who like worked out all the time, was obviously probably, doing something more than working out, to enhance the process, and spray tanning all the time. And so he like was apparently driving around in a smart car, which the image of that in and of itself shot this oversized man in this miniaturized car in a slow speed car chase around this neighborhood that then, and I thought it was all bullshit. And then we pulled the police records, and it really happened. And these guys were private investigators. We're not sure if they were MLB or Alex Rodriguez's people. We suspect MLB, but they were following him around, and he got freaked out, Porter, and he started to accelerate. They started to accelerate. He called Pete for help. Pete came in. It turned into this whole like roadside road rage incident. The cops showed up. It was a whole to do, and that was in the middle of the movie, and we just couldn't afford to do a car chase with a bunch of 8-year-old kids. And the second scene was an epilogue in federal prison. When Tony Bosch went to prison, he wound up in what they call a camp, which is like a even below minimum security kind of facility, right in Alabama. And in the camp, they had classes, and Tony, among other subjects, taught a nutrition class to his fellow prisoners. And his fellow inmate was Jeff Skilling from the Enron scandal. He was teaching a business course to his fellow inmates. And another inmate was Jesse Jackson Jr., who was in prison for corruption, who was teaching a politics and civics class to his fellow inmates. They say prison's the best place to get an education if you're a criminal. But I imagine this epilogue scene, with all these kids in their prison jumpsuits, teaching these classes, like little baby Jesse Jackson Jr., a little baby Jeff Skilling, and we were never able to get to that one either.
Oh my God, that would have been amazing.
That's so funny.
And then, so with Porter Fisher, how did he come out of this unscathed? I'm just shocked that one of these guys didn't rough him up or something. I mean, I guess that's my question. How is he still with us today?
Well, if you think about it, he didn't quite get out unscathed. He's like the one guy that made no money.
Yeah, he got screwed in the end. Yeah,
like the only guy who got $0. Which is remarkable. And he was the guy that sort of, kicked it all off. He was the guy that tipped the first domino, and yet he made nothing out of it. And theoretically, effectively, kind of ruined his life for several years. He was really scared. He was really concerned about, threats being made against his life from people involved in the scandal, from people not involved in the scandal. I mean, he was afraid of just fans, of some of the players that might seek retribution. So his life was a living hell for a while. And so when you say unscathed, I guess it's relatively speaking, like now it's been like 6 years and some water under the bridge. He's sort of returned to a normal life and work. But it was really hard for him for a really long time. But there was definitely some threats. Tony Bosch claimed there were threats against his life as well for the same reason, particularly when the pressure was on him to start cooperating with Major League Baseball against Alex and the other players. I think that he claims there were some threatening voicemails left, people threatening his family. He had said that we couldn't back up any of those claims. I had no reason not to believe him, but part of the reason we didn't use it in the doc was because we weren't able to independently verify it as we were a lot of the other information. Again, I have no reason to believe that he wasn't telling us the truth. We just couldn't independently confirm it, but he claims that was part of the anvil that broke the camel's back when he decided to cooperate with Major League Baseball, that he got a voicemail that not only threatened him, but specifically mentioned his family. And then he was like, well, that's it. I need protection, and I need, deep pockets to help me weather this storm.
Yeah. One of the guys that I've talked to who also ran an anti-aging clinic, I don't want to say his name, he wants to remain anonymous, but he claims that his clinic was shut down too after biogenesis, and that Major League Baseball ran amok down in Miami. Is this something? Is this true? Like, how could Major League Baseball, an industry with no power to close down businesses, but effectively impact so many businesses in Florida? Is that even a true accusation, or is that total bullshit?
Without knowing who you're talking about, and I respect their anonymity, but without knowing who they're talking about, I can't confirm it. But it would not surprise me. Major League Baseball yields a lot of power, especially in that world. In the world of juicing and anti-aging and testosterone clinics and all that. The HGH places, and to be fair, again, not knowing the particular person you're talking about, a lot of them operate in kind of a gray market, area. So some of them have legitimate doctors as their medical directors, but sometimes those doctors it's like a no-show job, where they're literally renting their prescription pad and DEA numbers to entrepreneurs, let's say, like Tony Bosch, who, in Tony's case, wore a lab coat and a stethoscope and portrayed himself as a doctor, and was using the prescription pad of other legitimate doctors who are basically on the back nine, hitting the links at Mar-a-Lago while this guy was writing prescriptions. And of course, when he didn't have access to prescriptions or legitimate shit, he turned to the black market and was buying testosterone and HGH out of a garage of a guy in a suburb of Miami who was mixing the shit up, like Breaking Bad style. And
this is Oogie.
Oogie was the middleman. Oogie wasn't actually cooking it, but he was the guy that allegedly helped Tony get it from this other guy in his garage. But so what I'm saying is that it's tough to run a clean operation in this sort of gray market. There's usually a lot of violations that if someone wants to target you and put you out of business, and that person has contacts in the Department of Health in a given state or a county, which you would think Major League Baseball would have that kind of influence, especially especially after the scandal erupted. They were able to. I would not be surprised to learn that they were able to, to have that kind of power.
Yeah. Go ahead, CT.
Oh, I was gonna say with Tony Bosch, like, even though he was pretending to be a doctor and all this, his dosages and his formulas, they clearly worked. I mean, I think the only reason he got caught with Manny Ramirez was because Manny, I guess, dosed himself a little too late or early, I believe it was. And obviously with the whole A-Rod thing, if it wasn't for Porter ratting him out and all that stuff. But I mean, do we believe that it was actually Tony that came up with these, dosages and stuff, or do you think he just, took these ideas from a real doctor?
Well, Tony seems to know his stuff. I mean, I've seen his books, his records, his composition books, and he has all these little formulas and things that he scribbled down. I'm sure he may have consulted with some people, but he when you talk to him, he exudes a great deal of confidence. He's a wonderful and very charismatic salesman, and you are correct in that he got results. I mean, in a gray market business, you're not doing a lot of advertising, traditional advertising. You don't have radio spots and billboards and stuff. His business built by word of mouth. And it only built by word of mouth because he was getting results for his clients. That's the bottom line. And so I think some of those formulas were definitely his. I know he was going to what they call compounding pharmacies or compound pharmacies, which is apparently a legal thing where you can go and get certain products made built out of other supplements and vitamins, and he was creating his own products with his own formulas that he was then selling and prescribing, if you will, to his clients, so that you not only were, paying for his services, but you would have to pay for his product, his supplements as well, that were being done in these compounding pharmacies, which is just a weird thing, but that's a part of this subculture as well. He was inventing his own supplements, packaging them, and producing them, and then selling them to his clients. And another thing that you might want to keep in mind is that Manny either did not follow the specific protocol. That's what Tony calls them, protocols.
Yeah.
The specific protocol, which is exactly which substance in what quantities to take when. And if you take them, if you steer clear enough of game day, you are supposed to not piss dirty. And the story goes that Manny took a substance too close to game day and was randomly tested and pissed dirty. There's also the matter of, it's also possible that Manny was taking something else or seeing somebody other than Tony, and there was other substances involved. There's any number of things that could have led to that. But to your point earlier, Alex never failed a test, to my knowledge, during this scandal, during this period. He had, of course, earlier in the century, but not during the biogenesis scandal. That evidence was entirely born out of the stolen documents that Porter Fisher provided the Miami New Times, and of course Tony Bosch's testimony and records and text messages and travel documents and everything that he had clearly been in contact with Alex about this.
Yeah. And speaking of Manny Ramirez, one of the funniest things, I don't know, I hope this isn't a spoiler. You can tell me to cut this out if you think it is.
Go ahead.
But to me, the funniest part of the movie was when Manny Ramirez hired Tony Bosch, that Tony Bosch had to sleep in the same room as he did in hotel rooms and tell him bedtime stories. I was like, this is like crazy. Like, it's almost too good to be true. You must have, when you stumbled across this movie, you must have said, holy shit, I just hit the goal. Like, have you ever had, is there any of all the movies you've made, Cocaine Cowboys, The U Part 2, Broke, what's the other fight one? I saw it on Netflix. Dogfight. That was a good movie. Is this the craziest story you've ever come across?
It's certainly the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, it's one of those things where the more you learn about it, the less sense it makes. And that's just a great story. I keep telling people, if you were a screenwriter or a novelist and you were writing this story, you would be fired on page 15. I mean, nobody would believe this shit. It doesn't make any sense. The character motivations, the decisions they make, people would be like, well, this is just dumb. Like, your characters don't make any sense. Your story is illogical. You're fired. And the fact that it's all real is just incredible. And the fact that it is such, I think, a uniquely Florida, particularly South Florida story. I mean, really, these are uniquely Florida men, and only in Miami characters. I really feel like we're just freebasing Florida fuckery with this movie.
There's so much that I wish I could ask you about this, but I just want to move on real quick, 2 or 3 more questions, and then we'll wrap this up. Many of your films do take place in Miami. Like, I think pretty much all of them do. Am I right?
Most of them, yeah.
Yeah. So what is your motivation? I know you're a Florida guy. You're from Miami, but what's your goal in telling these stories? What are you trying to convey to your audience, or what are you trying to do?
Well, when you come from a place as compelling and dynamic and unique as this, they always say to write what you know. So you want to tell the stories that you know, the ones that are close to home. It happens that there's a lot of appeal to Miami and Florida outside of these areas, so these are not provincial stories. They might be Floridiana, they might be very super Miami bro, but they seem to travel well. People all over the world have a great interest in this place, and they should. Miami is like America's Casablanca. It's a very unique place, and what I always say is that LA is where you go when you want to be somebody. New York is where you go when you are somebody. And Miami is where you go when you want to be somebody else.
Wow.
It's just always been a sunny place for shady people. And that's true of all of Florida. And I think the most interesting thing about it is that the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow. So if you want to know what challenges we'll face or calamities will befall us as a nation in the years to come, you need only look at Florida, and specifically South Florida. It's what T.D. Allman called the America's bellwether, the canary in the coal mine. And so there's a lot that can be learned about the rest of the country and where it's headed by what's happening here. So there's a lot of trends in sports, in drugs, in crime, in fraud, in government, in politics. There's a lot of trends that, if not started here, they are perfected here and really exported to the rest of the country. So I think it's an important place to keep an eye on and to know what's happening, because it'll give you a sneak preview of the shit to come.
Okay, cool. And do you have anything in the works coming up next?
Yeah, we're working on a couple things. We've got a new project premiered at the Miami Film Festival last month called Magic City Hustle. Okay. It's kind of like the U meets Broke meets Dogfight, but instead of backyard fighting, it's highlight. I don't know if you know the sport highlight.
It's a Spanish. That's a Spanish thing, right?
It is a Spanish thing. Yeah, from the Basque region, the players wear these hooked baskets on their hand. Mm-hmm. It looks like one of the players' kids said it's like Maui's hook from Moana is what it looks like. And they throw a ball really fast at the wall. The ball goes up to 150 miles an hour, depending on who's throwing it and how it bounces. So it's a pretty dangerous sport. It's a pretty weird sport. And last year, a casino in Miami called Magic City Casino, which is like this locals casino where like everybody's abuelo y abuelita goes and like dances to salsa music and sits at the the one-armed bandit for hours on end. It's a funny place, and they decided they were a Greyhound racetrack for 88 years, and they decided to get rid of the dogs and add highlight instead, because they need to run a parimutuel in order to keep their casino open. So the family are all University of Miami alum, and they're they give a lot of money to the university, but they've never really done anything for the players after they graduate. So they decided that instead of hiring professional highlight players or even amateur highlight players, they sent out an email to the entire athletic department, all former male athletes, and invited them to come and try out to play highlight.
Nice.
And
it's like the replacements.
It's bizarre, dude. It's like some of these guys never heard of highlight before. One of them said to his girlfriend, he's like, "Hey, do you know what Jalala is?" And she's like, "Jalala?" Like, "You mean highlight?" Yeah, it's spelled Jaialai. So they didn't even know how to pronounce it. They'd never put a cesta, the basket, on their arms before. And from February of 2018, they started practicing. And on July 1st of last year, they became professional highlight players. It's like Cool Runnings or something. It's funny. It's really heartwarming. We call it Magic City Hustle because it's also really about Miami's hustle economy, Miami's gig economy, and these guys who are kind of like trying to recapture former glory, from their college sports days, or in some cases, some of these guys did go on. Kenny Kelly went on to play in Major League Baseball. In fact, he's one of the highlight players. You've got some guys who played in the NFL, who a long time ago, let's say, who came to play highlight, and it is just a really touching story about what it takes to kind of survive in Miami. And it's called Magic City Hustle, and hopefully we'll get a chance to see it later on this year. And we're doing Dogfight Round 2.
Nice.
Right now, that begins with Dada 5000, the Don King of the backyard, fighting Kimbo Slice in that horrendous Bellator fight.
Oh, man. I remember that.
Yeah, we were there in Texas with Dada in Houston when it went down, and it was devastating. I mean, it was just – not only was it a terrible fight, but Dada died. He actually coded. And we were there in the hospital. It was just a really very emotional and very difficult time, and he survived miraculously, and he just did his first professional fight as a promoter, and they did it in Cheyenne, Wyoming. They did MMA in a triangular cage.
Oh man.
It was batshit. And we were there covering that, and it was pretty brutal. It was like, I think there was almost 12 knockouts in the 12 fights because it's a fucking triangle. There's like there's no place to go. It's like brutal. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, but it was.
Yeah, you won't be able to use the children actors for that one.
No. We let the fighters speak for themselves. So we'll speak with their fists anyway. But yeah, so we're working on that now as well. Hopefully for probably early 2020.
Yeah, maybe you can go complete opposite and use really old people or something.
Oh man, that'd be so funny.
All right, Billy, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really enjoyed talking to you. I urge everybody to watch Screwball. It really is an incredible documentary. I'm not just blowing smoke. It's unlike any documentary I think I've ever seen. It's really a crazy story. And thanks again, Billy. That was awesome.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, thanks
you.
Billy.
When the biogenesis thing came out, as an A-Rod fan, I was like depressed because I was like, fuck, like we had just gotten over the 2009 type of shit where he admitted that he had like taken and all that stuff, and it was like the whole world was against the A-Rod. But then this documentary kind of like makes me feel better about the whole thing because everybody was like 30.
Yeah, it makes you feel better, not because A-Rod like redeems himself, because he doesn't. Like there's things in this documentary that I didn't know that make me feel worse about A-Rod. But it makes me feel better because the way they made it seem was like he was orchestrating this whole thing, and he wasn't. You know what I mean? Like Major League Baseball, to me, Major League Baseball comes out looking the worst than anybody else.
Yeah, and I remember when everything was going on and how hard A-Rod was going at MLB. Like it was literally A-Rod trying to sue MLB, and I remember thinking to myself like, yo, he can't be this dumb. Like he's caught. Like just give it up. But then watching this movie, I kind of understand why he was so pissed off about everything, because basically like they made him the face of it and he went down for it. Like he basically took on like 90% of the heat.
No, yeah, exactly. And
I'm an A-Rod fan, man.
And he's the only one that fought baseball on it, so he looks the worst. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
Manny Ramirez got lucky when he got caught because what was it that happened?
Michael Jackson died.
Michael Jackson died. Farrah Fawcett died. So the story just died. But with Alex Rodriguez, that was like the #1 story. You know what I mean? And that's what I wanted to ask Billy. But then I started to feel like, okay, this guy's been on for 45 minutes. Like, I don't want it to end like it's ended before, where they're like, okay, I have to go. Like, do you have one more question? I wanted it to be more natural. Yeah. But I wanted to ask him, like, what the fuck possesses someone like Alex Rodriguez, the best, arguably one of the greatest of all time, to go to a fucking doctor who had treated Manny Ramirez, who got caught? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, would you go and see a doctor? Maybe it wasn't Tony Bosch's fault that he got caught, but would you? He's been on the news. His name has been out there before, and you're still gonna go back and say, I want what Manny was taking? Like, you're almost playing with fire a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This whole thing was so like crazy. Like I still kind of want to watch it again. You know, like I want to watch the whole thing over again.
Me too. I thought it was a good movie. Like it didn't feel like a documentary to me. And every single thing that happened in it, I was like, this is fucking nuts. The Manny Ramirez tell me a bedtime story shit, I was like, this is fucking crazy. That's insane, but it's believable. You know what I mean? Since we follow baseball, you're like, that totally makes sense. Like that would be something Manny does. You know what I mean?
And honestly, man, like with Manny Ramirez and A-Rod, and then you saw he had his list of clients. There was like celebrities in there and shit. I'm just like, nobody could tell me right now that there isn't performance enhancing usage in the major leagues right now. And it might be the biggest stars in the game, you know? Like
not just that, but Tony Bosch is not a doctor, but he from what I understand, well, maybe he was prescribing shit illegally, but whatever he was doing to A-Rod wasn't turning A-Rod into some sort of superhuman player, because this was at the time that A-Rod was in a decline, but maybe it helped A-Rod stay on the field a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? Maybe this is like something Major League Baseball should see and say, okay, maybe we should ban performance enhancers, should be banned. But if you're being like treated by a doctor, a licensed doctor, a physician, maybe you can allow it because it helps your players stay on the field for longer. And that's your product. That's what you're selling. You know what I mean? Like
exactly. So now it's like Major League Baseball did such a big, they tried so hard to get their hands on his notebooks and all that shit that who knows if they tweaked it. Now they got their own guys to do this shit. Who knows? Like, yo, and the thing is that I don't put it past Major League Baseball, man. You're talking to the CT conspiracy theorist over here. You know, like, I don't put it past Major League Baseball that they figured out a way to get their cake and eat it too. You know, like, yo, they figured out a way to juice the baseballs and not get called for it. And the fact that A-Rod is working, he's like the Sunday Night Baseball guy. And he was still an advisor to Yankees players. Like, come on, man. Like, there's shit going on, man. And one day the truth will come out.
Yep.
It's gonna be crazy.
Thanks everybody for listening. Thank you, Billy Corben. Thank you, CT, as always. And just a reminder that the Welcome to the Show podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/welcome to the show to get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial. That's audibletrial.com/welcome to the show. Peace out, everybody.